Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. In continuation of the series of videos that I have to help you when you have emotional hardship, when you've broken up with your girlfriend, with your boyfriend, you're divorced, or you're missing your ex, I would like to present to you a short talk that would be helpful in order for you to understand why is it that you think the girl who left you or the guy who left you, your ex, who left you is worthy of actually seeking, desiring him or her back. And why is it that you think she was the right girl for you? Now, I'm going to talk about one relationship. You can switch it around and make it to suit you. Why is it that you think the girl who left you was the right girl? Even though logically it's ended, so if it was the right girl, it wouldn't end, she would still be with you. But why is it that you know this and you still think you seek her, you want her, you miss her, and she was the right girl, and you need her affirmation, you need her to be with you to feel whole and to feel worthy? Why is it that you miss her? Why is it that you seek her? Why is it that you want the woman who didn't want to be with you back? As if she is the right girl for you, even though you went through the transition, you went through the relationship, and it didn't work out, and she left, or you left. Why do you still want her? What convinces you that you believe, despite of it all the differences and all the inconsistencies and all the contradictions, divisions between you two, you think you should get her back to feel whole? Why do you miss her? Well, let's look at it. When you break up, there are many things at work, but let's talk about two of them that pulls a wool over your eyes and doesn't let you see why you feel she was the right girl. Well, these two would be one, facts, how she was, what her personality was, the differences you had, the content of your consciousnesses were different. As you know, we are all the content of our consciousness, and that what makes us who we are. And if these contents are not really compatible, which in most cases they are not at the beginning until you actually compromise and build new content in the consciousness to bring that kind of a harmony together, and that takes time. So for these reasons, you don't focus on the quality and the differences and why you guys separated. These are facts, differences, characters, the way you treated yourself or she treated you. All these facts are there, yet it is trumped by your feelings. There's a feeling that you still feel for her, you want her back. Why do you have that feeling to become an evidence that she was the right girl for you, despite of the facts that are presented to you and there to see that she was not qualified and she was not the right girl for you and you guys were not compatible and it was not the right choice? Maybe at the beginning because of all the other things involved, the sex and the interest and intimacy and lust that you would mistakenly think it's love, all of that at the beginning, yet later on you realize there's so many differences, but this emotion after the breakup becomes an evidence for you that the facts are no longer credible and that the emotion is the evidence that she was the right girl for you. Why? Well, because we have so many challenges in life and shortcomings, things that we want and we don't have, things we strive and we hope for and we set our goals for, and we go through all kinds of challenges and difficulties to bring to fruition what we hope to accomplish in this journey of life. But in the midst of all these challenges and difficulties and ups and downs and devastations and disappointments and all that, there is one thing that fuels you and you gravitate toward and you desire more than almost anything else, because at that point that you arrive to that desire for that pleasure that you're seeking, which is sex, which is relationship, which is love, which is companionship, which is intimacy, at that moment you feel You don't lack anything, you don't miss anything, you don't want anything, and you have everything you wanted. Because at the time of the pleasure of sex and intimacy, you don't think about anything missing in your life, because the pleasure will take over, and this pleasure masks anything that could be shortcoming, and this becomes a remedy, a balsam to your pain. And that is why you seek that pleasure, whatever it may be. For some could be some substances, for some could be intimacy and sex. Whatever that pleasure is, you seek it, because that will make you feel there is nothing in this world missing for you, and there's nothing you need, and you have everything. Why? Because whatever that pleasure is that you're seeking, and when you arrive to it and you're experiencing it, intimacy, sex, drugs, whatever the hell it is that you're into, that desire for pleasure, and once you reach that pleasure, your brain secretes dopamine, because you get that pleasure, it feels so amazing that there is a high with that dopamine that is secreted from your brain. And that secretion of the dopamine, when you have continued that pleasure for a while, whatever it is throughout your life, you've been spending time with that desire for pleasure, and you achieve that pleasure, and you have that pleasure, whatever it may be, playing music, playing sports, intimacy, drugs, whatever it is, you continue it, and you have that feeling that every time you do, there is dopamine secreted, and you get that high and a perfect feeling of pleasure telling you, I don't need anything, everything is great. But after a while, you keep doing it, dopamine is addictive. So you no longer are doing it, you're having that desire for that pleasure for the sake of the pleasure. You're actually having desire for that pleasure because once you get to that pleasure, dopamine is secreted, and dopamine is addictive, and you're not addicted to dopamine. Why do you continue? Well, we'll get to that. So in this case, when you have this emotion for that girl, that emotion is because you're remembering the feeling you have when you have intimacy with her, when you're lovey-dovey, when you text each other, when you have feeling psychologically secure and compatible and fulfilled. And that gives you that dopamine secretion. And so right now, the emotion triggers the memory of the pleasure when you desire that relationship or when you guys were together. And you remember how it felt when you were together, which was the effect of the dopamine. So now you want the dopamine back. And so the feeling reminds you of what you get when you're with her, which is dopamine. And dopamine is addictive, and you're addicted to that dopamine, but that brand of that woman. Because being in love or being in a relationship with a woman, it has the same effect as if you have a certain kind of a cigarette or certain kind of a drug. You get addicted to that brand. So you're addicted to that girl. It's not that you can replace it right away with another girl and you'll be satisfied and get the same kind of a quality of the dopamine and pleasure and you'll be okay. It's like, it's not the same if you change the brand of your cigarette, you don't get the same high. Or a different drug, you don't get the same effects that you're used to. So you seek the same kind of a brand, so you seek the same kind of a woman. Now, why is it that it's so hard to get rid of it, even though when you realize it? Because when you used to be with that girl, and every time you had intimacy or togetherness, and the things you did together created that pleasure, which then it created that dopamine. Dopamine receptors, the synaptic neurons in your brain, they have a survival mechanism. They're designed to die when they are stimulated high and often. So in order for them to survive and not die, they have a down regulator. So when you are so intimate or getting the pleasure you want and you get that high with the dopamine release, whether it's the intimacy, relationship, or a drug, you're stimulating the synaptic neurons and they understand if it's long enough, after a period of time, and getting stimulated that high and hard, they have to downregulate so they won't die. When they downregulate, that means there are less receptors available for you to have them feel the pleasure you are experiencing, so they won't die. And because they have downregulated, there are not enough of them available to give you the same high with the same amount of drug or the same amount of experience of pleasure, whatever the pleasure that may be. And because there's not enough receptors to give you the same high, what do you have to do? You got to increase the drug to get the same high, because the receptors to receive that pleasure and release dopamine is not as many as before, is not as high as before. So therefore, you need to up the drug to get the same high, or up that pleasure, whatever it was, to get the same high. And every time you do that, more stimulation and longer, they downregulate further, to the point that eventually downregulate to survive, there would be not much receptors available to give you the high from the dopamine of that pleasure, which means you're addicted now, and you got to hit as high as you can in that drug and that pleasure, and you get nothing. That's when you're addicted. So you constantly think of her with that emotion, and you create that memory of that pleasure, which the memory itself triggers you to get some dopamine by just thinking about her. But you don't have her with you, so you have to hit harder, think about her more to get eventually more pleasure and get that dopamine again. And you're stimulating the synaptic neurons constantly, so they start going into the downregulating. When they downregulate, you got to think about her more in order to get the same high. They downregulate, you got to think about her more to get the same high. And you keep doing it, there will be so many downregulations and least number of synaptic neurons available for you that when you really keep thinking about her all day long, you still get nothing. That's when you're addicted to that memory. That's when you're addicted to get that emotion. And that's when you can't get on with your life and move on and realize that you should be focusing on the qualities and the facts rather than the memories of the pleasure that you had, so you can actually replace and bring the facts superseding the emotions that was triggering the dopamine, and you release yourself by allowing the qualifications to become more noticeable to you and to see that she or he was not qualified to be with you, the differences that you should focus rather than the emotions that would give you that pleasure to release the dopamine for you. I hope it wasn't too complicated and you could understand. And this is why it is so imperative for you to let go about the emotion and focus on the facts and the differences, contradictions and divisions, so you can logically understand that what you're seeking is not the right choice, rather than the emotions and the memory of the pleasure would convince you that she was the right choice, while the facts say otherwise. Hope that would be helpful to you, and I hope I was able to deliver it in this short time with least amount of explanations. And perhaps you can join me on my YouTube channel and live streams, and you can ask your questions, and I could be more thorough, and we'll have more time to talk about it. I'll talk to you soon. Subscribe on my channel, visit my channel, and go through the videos that you might be interested in. Mind@seekstruth.com is making it one step away to talk to me one-on-one on Skype and discuss what's concerning you. I'll talk to you soon.